So I want you to imagine for a moment that you turn on your faucet. You are anticipating that morning cup of coffee, and when you turn the water on, no water comes out. This is a scenario that is becoming more and more prevalent as our water infrastructure in rural America is aging. In Akron, Michigan, for example, a town of 350 people, mostly retirees, uh, have a fixed income. So that means the town is limited on what it can do. So mostly the public works director digs up the line and makes small repairs using couplers and a inserted piece of pipe to bridge the gap in the water break. Jackson, Mississippi, a city of 150,000, same thing. They had to shut it down for a week, make the repair, and it took them 2 weeks to flush the system out because a lot of the pipes are old and contain contaminants when the pressure is not applied to the system. It is systems like these that illustrate the major problem in the United States. The funding challenges. When you're a town, you either have to raise taxes, raise rates, apply for loans, or have a grant writer on staff, which most people can't afford. And then you got to pay your staff, and water is highly specialized and requires certifications. So that further adds to the problem of replacing these pipes. So the purpose of this study is to seek to address the challenge of effectively allocating resources to rural municipalities. The study of optimizing resource allocation for sustainable development in rural municipalities with a focus on access to water is of great importance for several reasons. First, it addresses the current issue. Rural municipalities are without water or are having trouble accessing clean water as our infrastructure decays, thus leading to loss of health and well-being for a lot of people in these communities. Second, enhancing sustainable development. Resource allocation is an essential component of sustainable development, and optimizing it in rural municipalities can promote long-term health, economic, social, and environmental sustainability. Third, it will inform policy and decision making. The more information they have, the better decisions they can make to support their constituents. Fourth, and finally, contributing to academic research. It will help fill the gaps in our literature so that we can understand the problem better. The research questions that I will be answering with this study are as follows. 1. What are the key factors that affect resource allocation for water infrastructure and services in rural municipalities? 2. How do sustainability key factors impact the availability and quality of water in rural municipalities? 3. What strategies can be employed to optimize resource allocation to rural municipalities for water infrastructure and services? The objectives that I intend to meet are: identify the key factors that influence resource allocation for water infrastructure and services in rural municipalities. Second, to assess the impact of these factors on the availability and quality of water in rural municipalities. 3, to develop strategies for optimizing resource allocation to rural municipalities for water infrastructure and services. Overall, this study's significance lies in its potential to inform policies and practices that enhance access to clean and reliable drinking water in rural municipalities. The theory that will be guiding this study will be Sustainable Livelihoods Framework. It is a conceptual framework that provides comprehensive and holistic approach to sustainable development. It recognizes the complexity of poverty and the relationship of various components of livelihoods, and it observes 5 key factors: human, social, natural, physical, and financial. And it observes the interplay between these 5 factors, and that is what will be applied when this study is conducted. Some useful definitions: resource allocation It's the process of distributing resources such as funding, personnel, and materials among competing demands or priorities. Rural municipality, it's a local government entity that governs a rural area, typically consisting of small towns or unincorporated areas. Sustainable development, a development approach that aims to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Overall, the remainder of the dissertation will build on the foundations that we have established here, which is the study questions, the theoretical framework, and the methodology. This chapter provided an overview of the topic, including its significance and relevance in the context of our municipalities and access of water. I have also presented the research questions that will be addressed, the theoretical framework, and an overview of the methodology of the study. Moving on to Chapter 2. Access to clean and reliable drinking water is a fundamental human right and a critical aspect of public health. This literature review aims to examine the existing research on the lack of access to clean and reliable drinking water and the inadequacy of resource allocation to address the issue. It will be built on these following themes: the importance of access to clean and reliable drinking water, the factors contributing to the lack of access, existing policies and strategies leaders are using to address the problem, the challenges and limitations of the current approaches to addressing the problem, and potentially new or innovative solutions to address the lack of access to water. So the search strategies I used, CBU Library Services, OneSource, Google, various electronic databases, and the public library, as well as government resources like Kansas Rural Water Authority, for example. I've used search terms such as resource allocation, drinking water, water contamination, water infrastructure, water treatment, governance, water management, and water policy. In the literature review, I took a deep dive into the current state of water management, including access issues such as drinkability, infrastructure funding, resource allocation, policy, and current solutions proposed. In terms of access, some of the barriers that I found so far is data. People and government leaders just don't have access to accurate data. Legal and regulatory constraints. People make policies that try to solve one problem and create barriers for another. Technical challenges and funding seem to go hand in hand, trying to get quality water technicians while at the same time getting funding for it. Like a lot of it's block grants right now, so grant writers seem to be a missing resource for a lot of rural municipalities. So I found one article that talked about the rural California situation where these authors found arsenic contamination in the drinking water systems, and it tended to be in poor rural areas. So some current policy approaches. What I found is politicians get elected with biases, and then those biases get applied to water policy and water management. And it especially becomes apparent when water availability, such as scarcity, or economic conditions, such as unemployment or a pandemic, when they interplay with these politicians' biases, that leads to policies that discriminate against people, especially on the social strata. Emmanuel and Ryan, for example, found that another interesting approach, they looked at indigenous communities and now how they manage water. And they found that the indigenous communities actually came up with a lot of innovative solutions because they do not have a lot of help from Canada in this regard. Current infrastructure, I still need to add some depth to that, but I found a particular study on Romania. It examined the relationship between piped water supply and usage. And I know might be shocking to some people, but people who had more money were able to use more water. Strange. Solutions being considered. One study found that uh, collaboration is the best way for communities to overcome the challenges, and in the communities they looked at, that was definitely apparent. Another author found that they looked at water policies such as supply side measures like infrastructure improvement and demand side measures such as conservation and efficiency improvement. No matter which way you go, collaboration with stakeholders was still the determinant of success or failure. And another author found the utilization of computerized modeling, which I found interesting, because when you use computerized models and algorithms to conduct resource allocation, it took the bias out of it, which I thought was a good tool for water managers to use. In this particular study, they examined the Upper San Pedro River Basin in Arizona. So definitely a lot of good research so far, but definitely a lot of things that still need to be looked into. The theoretical framework used for this literature review was looking at it through the lens of sustainable livelihood framework. And as we visited earlier, it's a holistic approach to sustainable development. It recognizes the complexity of poverty and interrelationships that lead to poverty. The 5 key components that it looks at is human, social, natural, physical, and financial. And it acknowledges that there is an interdependence and influence between each of these factors when looking at resource allocation of water, infrastructure, and services in municipal areas. The significance of this study cannot be overstated. First, it sheds light on the challenges and opportunities of water allocation in the United States, specifically water scarcity and water-related conflicts that could be present. Also, it identifies gaps in the literature, highlighting where we still need to do more research, like in infrastructure. Third, this chapter's analysis is grounded in a theoretical framework, the Sustainable Livelihoods Framework, which provides a useful lens for examining the relationships in these situations. And the significance of this research lies in its potential to inform people who make decisions, like water managers. The literature review, in conclusion, has examined multiple aspects of water access, including policy approaches, infrastructure, and solutions that are on the table. The studies reviewed in this chapter have shed light on various aspects of water resource allocation, including the impact of climate change, how AI can assist us, and the economic welfare loss associated with groundwater allocation. Access to clean and reliable drinking water is essential for the sustainability and well-being of rural communities. However, the resource allocation for water infrastructure and services in rural areas is often a complex and challenging process. Through a sustainable livelihood framework, I will analyze the key factors that influence resource allocation for water infrastructure and services in rural municipalities of Kansas. Addressing these disparities and promoting equitable access to infrastructure funding is critical to ensuring the long-term prosperity of rural communities. By acknowledging and working to overcome these obstacles, public administrators and policymakers can help level the playing field and ensure that all municipalities have a fair shot at securing the funding and resources that they need. This study will seek to address the challenge of effectively allocating resources to rural municipalities. The research questions I will be using that I will be answering are: what are the key factors that affect resource allocation for water infrastructure and services in rural municipalities? How do sustainability key factors impact the availability and quality of water in rural municipalities? 3, what strategies can be employed to optimize resource allocation to rural municipalities for water infrastructure and services? The study will employ a mixed methods approach with a case study mentality to investigate the resource allocation for water infrastructure and services in rural municipalities of Kansas. The sample size will be all rural municipalities, less than 2,500 people, and cannot be a part of a larger metropolitan area or statistical area. The instrumentation for the study will be both primary and secondary sources. The primary sources will include surveys, interviews, and focus groups with key stakeholders, including water resource managers and local government representatives, agricultural organizations, and community members. The survey questions will be designed and will collect demographic data. It will also collect their attitudes regarding water, and it will also probe, it'll also be based on research questions and relevant literature on resource water management and allocation methodologies. And then I will use, when I'm done collecting that data from both primary and secondary sources, I will code them, and then I will the coding the survey data I will code into a statistical package for social scientists. That's a software that I will use to analyze the data once they're coded, and then I will utilize the Sustainable Livelihoods framework to help me explain the data, both the narrative portion and the statistical portion, to help explain and answer the research questions that were originally presented in the study. As with any study, there are limitations. One limitation is the focus on rural municipalities in Kansas, which may limit the generalizability of the findings to other regions or types of communities. There may also be a limitation in the Sustainable Livelihood Framework in the specific context of water resource allocation, and the sample size of the study may be relatively small, which could impact the overall reliability and generalizability of the findings. In summary, this chapter focused on the resource allocation for water infrastructure and services in rural municipalities in the state of Kansas. We aim to identify the key factors that affect resource allocation for water infrastructure and services in rural municipalities, and understanding how the sustainability factors impact availability and quality of water in rural municipalities, and explore strategies that can be employed to optimize resource allocation for water infrastructure and service in rural municipalities. It's a mixed methods approach utilizing both quantitative and qualitative data. And the sample size again was Kansas municipalities, less than 2,500 people, and are not part of a metropolitan statistical area. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the first three chapters of this dissertation have made it clear that resource allocation for water infrastructure and services in rural municipalities is a complex issue. The literature review provided a comprehensive overview of the challenges and opportunities in water resource allocation, while the research design and methodology in Chapter 3 outlined a clear path to data collection and analysis using the Sustainable Livelihoods framework. Through these research questions, the study aims to identify the key factors affecting resource allocation and the impact of sustainability on water availability and quality in rural municipalities. Additionally, the study seeks to identify strategies for optimizing resource allocation to rural municipalities for water infrastructure and services. The limitations of the study were also acknowledged, such as the limited sample size and potential for bias in self-reported data. However, the study provides valuable insights into the complex issue of resource allocation for water infrastructure and services in rural municipalities, which can inform future research and policy decisions in this area. Overall, the first three chapters I have laid a foundation for this remainder of the dissertation and offer a promising avenue for addressing the challenges and opportunities in water resource allocation in rural municipalities. Thank you for watching.